when you read Victor, or when you would have read, if you've ever read his translation, Victor Alexander's of the Gospel of John, you get that clearly. He added an audio commentary to his translation of the Gospel of John. He decided to repost the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Okay, he decided at that time to repost the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John were already posted, and you'd find the links at the top right. He's satisfied that presenting the Aramaic New Testament scriptures with the original terms, preserved intact from the time of Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah, and the apostles, whom he sent forth to preach the gospel, is the best that he could do to spread the true gospel, and hopefully restore the apostolic faith. But he would continue to post commentaries to clarify some of the most critical aspects of his translation. The translation project. He goes on about Paul. This is the main justification of... Okay, so you see, Paul wrote his letters to the Greeks, and therefore all the New Testament was originated in Greek. Baloney. This is the main justification of Western theology in claiming that the New Testament was originated in Greek. What this does is that all those followers of Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah from the East, are ignored and forgotten, and the faith is denied. Who are these followers of Yeshua? They are descendants of the Asherai in northern Mesopotamia, such as the Surai, Atarai, Assyrians. Okay, you got the ones in Mesopotamia, is that the Atarai? Or the Surai? One is in Mesopotamia, Iraq, etc., Umia, and the other is in India, because Thomas went there and preached to these Indians who converted, and the Assyrians. The descendants of the Babylonians in southern Mesopotamia, such as the Chaldeans and Sumerians, the balance of the Aramaic-speaking people in the Near East and the Holy Lands, the descendants of the small kingdoms that proliferated during the Greek and Roman empires, and the descendants of the African followers of Yeshua Mashiach, such as the Ethiopians and the Coptics, or the Copts. That'd be the Egyptians, right? Yeah, pretty sure that's the Coptics, the Egyptians. They are all forgotten by the West when it comes to mentioning who are the followers of Yeshua Mashiach. Who are all these nations and ethnicities that followed Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, from the beginning of the apostolic age? They are the fruits of the labour of the 12 disciples of Yeshua Mashiach, his workers, right, fishers of men, and the rest of the apostles that went to East to preach the gospel. The other 70, right? Why does the West only talk about Peter and Paul? And Mary. What about the other disciples? Here are the names of all the disciples. Shimon, Kepha, Simon Peter, Andreas, Andrew his brother, Yaakov, James, Yochanan, John his brother, Philippus, Philip, Bartholomew, Tuma, Thomas, Matthias, Matthew, Yaakov bar Calpe, James son of Alphaeus, Tide, Jude, Shimon the Canaanian, Simon the Zealot, and Matthias, who was chosen to replace Yehuda, Judas Iscariot. What happened to them? Did they not go all over the world and preach the gospel of Yeshua Mashiach? Well, Judas Iscariot regretted his treachery, so he offed himself. What happened to them? Did they not go all over the world and preach the gospel of Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah? Were they not Jews who spoke the ancient Aramaic language? In what language were the books of the New Testament and the Old Testament written? Did they preach in Greek? Okay, so these people were Jews, Galilean fishermen, etc., by trade, probably by birth, but you call them Jews because they were under that Mosaic law, the Pharisees, etc., etc. They were following that, and they did the circumcision, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, they basically were Jews. Okay, they were physical, and then they became the spiritual Jews of Revelations, or the Scriptures. It was circumcision of the heart. Why deny the work of all those disciples and apostles of Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah? Why deny Eastern Christianity for 1,000 years? Western Christianity didn't begin until the 2nd millennium, and now that's the 3rd millennium or more. Yeah, we're in the 3rd millennium, aren't we? Still there. Western Christianity is trying to ignore the Eastern followers of Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, again. But this can't happen because Maria won't, or Lord God, Master God, won't allow it to happen. The knowledge of the original scriptures recorded in the ancient Aramaic language is beginning to be spread everywhere. Yeah, and that's what we're doing. on behalf of this translator, because we are really fascinated by it. We've been looking at it for 4 or 5 years, and we used to be real confused with the normal Americanized Bible versions, translations of what they're telling us at a local church, all that sort of stuff. Totally baffled, totally confused, and they wouldn't answer our questions. So, you're going too deep. Just read along and all that sort of stuff, and don't ask questions. And then when we found this, we were totally unconfused. Right? It's just so clear, because it's got idioms, it's got everything explained, and plus the translator, when we used to email him, he used to help out a lot. He wouldn't get angry at us or anything. We'd get nasty. He was actually quite nice. He had a bit of a chuckle with us. Esau knew that the scriptures, here we go, Victor E. Alexander's efforts to reintroduce the original ancient Aramaic terms and certain critical names and words should help everyone who wishes to know Esau Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah, and his teachings. Moreover, the shared knowledge between the followers of Esau will help us bridge the gap in the faith. And he says, email him if you've got questions or clarifications. That's what he used to do. Esau knew that the scriptures would be misinterpreted. Nevertheless, he followed them and showed his disciples how he fulfilled them. He led by example. He wanted them to spread his teachings regarding the scriptures by his example and their adherence to what he taught them. That is why his teachings are so crucial to an understanding of the prophecies regarding him. Esau was on earth only 33 years, etc., etc. The 4 Gospels depict his life on earth from 4 different perspectives. Matthew is historical, Mark is historical, not hysterical. Mark is dynamic, Luke is literary, and John is spiritual. The 4 Gospels tell the story of Esau, or Jesus, but it is Paul who ties the Old and New Testament scriptures together. The book of Acts is written by many apostles, but it is clear from the ancient Aramaic literary styles contained that it is Paul who compiled them. Paul also trained the apostles in the scribal art. His diction is evident throughout the book of Acts, even though it is mostly Shilah who scribed them, who wrote them down, right? So it is evident that Paul wrote some of the chapters himself. The same goes for the letters of the apostles. It is clear that Paul compiled them as well. He put them together as a book, right? Or a whole lot of books. He trained most of the scribes who wrote them. Paul also compiled John's revelation. John's voice is distinct, however. All 3 texts written by John have the same style. The 3 letters of John, the Gospel of John, and Revelation are clearly the work of one scribe. With the ancient Aramaic, it is possible to go back to the origin of what Jesus intended, or Esau intended. When Esau came to the world 2,000 years ago, he was faced with great opposition. He knew that it would be so, but he had decided from before that it should be this way. Glory be to his name. He knew everything. However, as a man, he had a life-saving mission to impart. He had to sacrifice himself for the sake of humanity. Nothing was going to work if he had not come to the world. From the time that writing was invented 6,000 years ago until his coming, the prophets had tried to explain the law. They had admonished the people regarding the intentions of the creator of the universe, but everything written in the scriptures would not suffice, because it takes somebody getting killed before anyone admits that the cause of death was legitimate. Blood is the only thing that works in the end. People don't believe it in their hearts until somebody dies for them. They tried sacrificing animals, burning a portion of their crops, and killing whoever transgressed the law, but nothing was as convincing as the ultimate sacrifice by the Son of Allah, or the Son of God himself. It was prophesied that Esau would come, or Jesus would come, to the world, and he would sacrifice himself on behalf of humanity. But who was it going to be? Secular historians have written about Esau, or Jesus, so we know that Esau, or Jesus, did come to the world. He has been known by many names today: Jesus, Emmanuel, Jesus, Yeshua, Yeshua, Michael, and so on. In Aramaic it is Esau, but whatever he is called, we know that he has sacrificed his life willingly, as it is recorded in the scriptures. The scriptures have well documented this. The only way that worked for us was that the creator of the universe should send his son to die for us, a sacrifice that would forever prove his love for us, because there was no other way. Separated from God, heaps of sins upon us, fallen from grace, short of God's glory. So he sent a saviour, deliverer, a redeemer. He probably offered himself. We heard that on a show once here called Radio Rema. He was willing to do that, right? For us. We do not have to kill anything or anyone or anybody to prove our loyalty, since Esau gave his own life for our sake, and so forth. Goes deep into that. Order of the books, the project. Jesus knew. Esau knew everything. He knew how hard it would be to explain his mission to the world. Okay. And Victor and Alexander wished people would understand why the ancient Aramaic scriptures are essential to an understanding of the faith in his name is Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, and he wishes you could learn to say it. Us Westerners find it hard. There's a way of doing that. It's like we always say Yoshua, get it all wrong. You say it's Esau. There's Y-S-H-O, which is just Y is double E, S-H-O, Esau, easy as. Okay, it would not solve all the problems with the interpretation, but it would help. The controversies over which was older and which was dialect of Aramaic that Esau spoke can all be traced to the denial that Esau, Jesus, was the Messiah, Mashiach, prophesied by the scriptures that he was Allah, God, in the flesh and in the muta, the manifestation of God. Okay, or God was the embodiment of that manifestation, who sacrificed himself for the sake of humanity. Only by following the ancient Aramaic language can one ascertain such words as the Trinity, Tala Kanuma, or the Triunity, and their meaning. Only by studying the ancient Aramaic language that was spoken by the prophet Jonah and the people of Nineveh, the Ninevites, several centuries before Esau came to the world, does one realize that this dialect called Asherit, the language of the Asherai, still retains the alphabet in the original order, with the original vowels and the manner of pronunciation peculiar to the Galileans of the time. So it's particular to them, right? Okay, they're the ones that speak that. Spoke that at the time of Esau, or Jesus the Messiah. For example, I am the Alap and the Dal has been changed to I am the Alpha and Omega from the original Aramaic, Galilean Aramaic, to the Greek. The latter are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. This is not the correct title of Allah or God. Other Aramaic derivatives, such as Arabic and Persian, don't retain the order of the alphabet either, so the concepts of the original scriptures aren't retained in these languages as well. All translations of the Bible retain many of the doctrines and stories of the Bible, but only the ancient Aramaic retains all of them. And Victor N. Alexander's translation is faithful to the original ancient Aramaic language that Esau spoke and read the scriptures from. The ancient Aramaic and the ancient Hebrew are the only dialects that retain all the consonants of the original scribal language of the Bible, because originally they didn't have vowels. Well, Aramaic had an A, but it was considered more of a consonant. It wasn't until the Masoretes came along and they added vowels and all these dots and all this sort of stuff, like to make it easy to pronounce and all this sort of stuff, that it changed the structure of those languages, because they're both sister languages. Not only changed the structure of that language, also changed the meaning of the words. They originally had the same words, the same meanings, but when the Masoretes did this sort of thing, or whoever did this sort of thing later on, it really messed it up. It became same words but different meanings, like Iuma, which means unmeasurable period, unfathomable period, era, age, or day with capital D, and in Hebrew Yom, which means day, and they're referring to the day of the week, 24-hour day and night, not an unfathomable or immeasurable period or age or era. There's a difference. The controversies over which script was older and which was dialect of Aramaic, etc., etc. All translations of the Bible retain many of the doctrines and stories of the Bible, but only the ancient Aramaic retains all of them. And Victor N. Alexander's translation is faithful to the original ancient Aramaic language that Esau spoke and read the scriptures from. The ancient Aramaic and the ancient Hebrew are the only dialects that retain all the consonants of the original scribal language. This is the sacred scribal language, Lisan HaTikkus Saprea, of the Bible. But only the ancient Aramaic of Nineveh retains the original vowel sounds. This is why Victor N. Alexander provided all with so many audio and video clips. We can't play them because of they stopped the Adobe Flash Player, and they got this thing called Ruffles and this other Flash Player 2023 or something, and all rubbish. They don't work. So when you hear and see various scripts and pronunciations of Aramaic over the internet, don't be confused by the claims of many that theirs is the oldest or most authentic presentation. Most of those are people who went to Bible college, seminars or seminaries, or learnt through a course online. Okay, they paid for it and they learnt Syriac, modern Syriac or modern Aramaic. not the original ancient long dead, no longer written, no longer used or spoken, Tab Eshret or Galilean Aramaic. They were using a modern vernacular, but they have the cheek to say that they can this Victor and Alexander, a native-born Aramaic-speaking translator from Mesopotamia, is saying it all wrong. Yeah, you can speak it better than a native-born speaker. You learnt it all from a library or something, and you're more fluent than the original native speaker of it. No, that just does not work out somehow. Okay. So when you hear and see various scripts and pronunciations of Aramaic over the internet, don't be confused by the claims of many that theirs is the oldest or most authentic presentation. There's only one language and one dialect that Esau spoke, and that's the Galilean of his day, the original ancient Galilean Aramaic. What Victor's shown you is not a construct or plausible translations or pronunciations of the ancient Aramaic language, like some movies have attempted to do by distorting the story of Esau. Mashiach. It's like Passion of the Christ. It's a mixture of Arabic and Syriac or something, and it's totally silly. It's a mishmash. Half the time it's like they're mumbling. So what he's showing is not a construct. Okay, it's not a distortion of the story and his teachings. His pronunciation captures the true meanings of what Maran Esau Mashiach, or Lord or Master Esau Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, said and did 2,000 years ago. The significance of the ancient Aramaic language. One of the most sophisticated ways to deny the Creator's triune, it's a triune Godhead, 3 as 1, nature, is teaching that the Old Testament was originated in Hebrew and that the New Testament was originated in Greek. The Old Testament was originated in Hebrew, and the New Testament was originated in Greek? No. This way, the variations in the pronunciation of the alphabet could be used as a tool to manipulate the meaning of the scripture's words, and nobody would be the wiser, as it sounds logical that the prophets wrote in Hebrew and that Paul wrote in Greek because the prophets were Jewish and the early converts were Greeks and Romans. It sounds logical, right? It sounds really stupid. Yeah, they were Jews, spoke. They wrote in Hebrew. Paul was a Jew, even though he became a Roman citizen, etc. And he wrote in Greek. He was probably educated like that, so he could probably do it. And all this other stuff. The prophets were Jewish, yeah, and the early converts were Greeks and Romans. Yeah, well, those ones that Peter and all them went to, or was it Paul? He converted them into the faith, right? Well, Abraham came from Mesopotamia together with his wife Sarah. They spoke the ancient Aramaic of that early period, just as Noah, his wife and children had spoke the earlier version of the ancient Aramaic in Mesopotamia. Then there came Isaac, whose wife Rebekah was from Mesopotamia. She was his second cousin. And then Jacob married Leah and Rachel. Like, did he have 2 wives? Who were also from Mesopotamia, who were also from the house of this great uncle, of his great uncle. So they all spoke the same language, the ancient Aramaic. In the centuries that followed the life of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, there came the 12 tribes of Israel. So they came after. Okay, so originally there was Abraham and his lot in Ur of Chaldee, or Babylonia, in Mesopotamia, Syria there, and was it Arpachshad? What's his name? Japheth, one of Noah's sons, had a descendant, Arpachshad, and then eventually he had a son called Eber, E-B-E-R. So this Japheth became known as the father of the Hebrews. So this Eber, Hebrew, known as a Hebrew, he migrated and travelled with Abraham into the land of Canaan. They first went to Haran, and then either Abraham's father or his uncle died, Terah, in Haran, and then they eventually went to Canaan and migrated into that land and so forth, which is occupied by somebody else, and then later on invaded possibly and occupied by the ancient Egyptians. In the centuries that followed the life of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, there came the 12 tribes of Israel. which emerged out of Jacob's 12 sons. They all spoke the ancient Aramaic language. They all spoke it, but the script kept changing and the dialects kept evolving, as languages do. The Hebrew language then came from Mesopotamia, as we just stated, in Ur of Chaldea, when Abraham was there. The word Avrai, Hebrew, came from the word for Passover. Avrai, Hebrew, came from the word for Passover. The angel of Allah, God, Aver, in other words, passed over. That's the Brita. Yeah. He's actually put A-W or A-W-E-R, but yeah, that's there, right? A-V-E-R. That's the name of the Hebrews that passed over. They made a journey across lands, right? Over the children of Israel. In other words, passed over the children of Israel. Okay, we got it. Passover, the angel of Allah, God, Aver, it's not to do with the other one. In other words, passed over the children of Israel. Yeah, so this angel of death, when they put the blood of the lamb on their door, it just went past, and whoever didn't have it, like some Israelites, didn't listen, thought, never mind that rubbish. Didn't put any on there, so they died right along with the Egyptian children and all that sort of stuff. He delivered them from death. Pasir or delivered them, and therefore Pikhat or deliverance. Pikhat is how the Jews pronounce the name of Passover in Hebrew even today. Okay, so the other one we're talking about, our word, is actually different. That's the people who made the journey. That's the name for the Hebrews in the ancient Aramaic Hebrew in Genesis. And when did the word Jewish come into use to describe the Hebrew people's religion and name? After Jacob's son Judah, Yehudah, in the Aramaic, settled in Judea, which was named after his tribe, Judah, Ehud. Centuries later, the word for Jew became Hodaya. In short, all the biblical names were from the ancient Aramaic language. Hodaya. Centuries later, the word for Jew became Hodaya. The Hebrew script and dialect evolved out of the original ancient Aramaic language. The actual script was modified after the time of Moses. The commandments were given to Moses in the ancient Aramaic because the ancient Aramaic was older than the Egyptian, and it did not depict pictures of animals in its forms, like the hieroglyphics, right? However, the Hebrew script, which is familiar to people studying the Bible in the Hebrew, is a more recent development. It's a revived, that's the word we look for. It's a revived revision of the original, or supposedly original Canaanite Ugaritic language. In the early 1900s. It was invented to codify the scriptures, but it led to altered interpretations, and therefore the present inconsistencies that resulted in the denial of Esau's triune essence. They're very determined that there's only one God, no other, and their belief system, their religion is all monotheistic based, same as Islam, but they have the addition, the Prophet Muhammad. There's only one God alone. He has no son, he has no significant other, and there's the Prophet Muhammad. The Greek Septuagint and the Latin translations from it deleted the reference to the Trinity. And the modern Hebrew Torah is translated from the Septuagint for this reason also. It makes no reference to the Trinity. Other translations into Arabic and Persian don't contain the word for Trinity in its original form, Tala Kanuma. The Greek original translation also makes a reference to the word kanome as kanomos. The Greek language lacks many of the letters of the alphabet that refer to biblical terminology. Even the name of Esau does not maintain any of the phonetics or letters of the original name, so it comes out as Jesus, which is translated as Jesus in English. These deficiencies in the Greek, Latin, and the Western language make it very hard for a true understanding of the meaning of the New Testament, just as the reliance on the Septuagint has made it hard for a true understanding of the Old Testament scriptures. Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah, said to the Pharisees and to the scribes in Matthew 12:39, a wicked and adulterous generation wants signs, and no signs will be given it, except for the sign of Jonah the prophet. For just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights, so will be the Son of Man. So will the Son of Man in the heart of the earth. Or in the tomb, 3 days and 3 nights. The men of Nineveh will rise at judgment and with this generation, these Pharisees, Sadducees, those people in those days, and hold it accountable, for they repented by the preaching of Jonah, and behold, one greater than Jonah is here now. The language of the men of Nineveh was the ancient Aramaic. Nineveh was the last capital of Mesopotamia. That's the language that Jonah spoke to them. It was and remains to this day the only sacred scribal language of the scriptures. The original ancient Aramaic church that emerged out of Jerusalem was a church congregation. You want to put it that way? Preserved the ancient Aramaic scriptures in the Aramaic scriptures in the Lishana Artika, ancient tongue. Well, Lishana Artika Saprea, sacred scribal language of God. And this is Victor in Alexander's native language. He speaks, reads and writes the modern Aramaic also, and he's also studied the ancient form of it over the last 60 years. Ooh, yeah, he's about 70 or 80 now. He knows most of the dialects of modern Aramaic, so when he does readings from the scriptures, he tries and pronounces it as accurately as possible, and not just to make it sound more authentic, or make it sound cool, but to maintain the original meanings of the words, the expressions and figures of speech. Also, the scriptures were written mostly in verse, and needs to probably sing them a lot too, to remember them. So it's necessary to capture the beauty of the language as it glorifies our Maya, or Lord Master, and Maran, or Master, Lord and Master, Yeshua Mashiach. See? It's the only one to have those two names, those two titles, because that's why it says in Scripture he came in the name, or the title of the Father. Differences in interpretation is not the problem. Yeshua, Jesus chose 12 men to be his disciples. One of them betrayed him, Judas, and committed suicide. He didn't think that he would be forgiven, or maybe he did not think he deserved to be forgiven. All the disciples ran away or denied knowing Yeshua. They were all afraid. But they all repented, because no one wants to die. They want to live on. They all repented and were forgiven, and they ended up dying, being martyred anyway. The unrepentant disciple was replaced. There were again 12 disciples. They went all over the world and preached the faith in Yeshua's name, or Jesus' name. The mission of the disciples was to spread the teaching of Yeshua Mashiach. They came from different backgrounds and probably had different accents, or maybe even different dialects, and probably wore different colours. The 4 Gospels were written in the ancient Aramaic language. Reading them in the original, it is clear that they had different styles. The writers had different vocabularies, like different novelists would have in modern times. Stylistically, they are all very well written. Paul was the most accomplished scribe among them. He had been a Pharisee, so it is to be expected that his writing was phenomenal. Yeah, because he was educated, right? He had that as a Roman citizen. He had that privilege. The disciples didn't really need it at first, because they were like fishermen or whatever, right? Galilean fishermen. That was their trade. They fed their village, they fed themselves, their families, and that's all they really need to worry about.